Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com. Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Your hosts are Joseph and Madison Whalen, a father and daughter team making their way through the challenges of the teenage years.
Welcome to Insights into Teens. This is episode 105, Creativity, D&D Role-Playing. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my imaginative and creative co-host, Madison Whalen.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing today, Maddie?
I'm doing all right.
Glad to hear that. How was your week?
It's been going all right so far. First, I'm now back in school after my spring break.
Okay, nothing too strenuous, I hope?
Not really, no.
Okay, good. So this is another creativity podcast. We had done 3 of them already. This was supposed to have been done along with the other 3 to make it a complete set of 4. Unfortunately, we had some series of unfortunate events that had delayed our D&D session for a little while there, and we didn't want to jump into this one until we have the next session with the new Dungeon Master. So we had our session last weekend. We have some opinions about it, and we can now talk about it in a slightly more informed manner, I guess. Before we do that, though, I would invite folks to subscribe to the podcast. You can get the video versions of the podcast if you look for Insights into Things. That gives you video versions of all of our shows, or you can get just the audio versions of the podcast listed as Insights into Things. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Amazon, and pretty much any place you can get a podcast. We would also invite folks to give us your feedback. Tell us how we're doing. Give us some suggestions for show topics. We're always looking for suggestions. Last week's show was actually a viewer-submitted suggestion. You can email your comments in to comments@insightsintothings.com. You can get us on Twitter at insights_things. You can get us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. We are at Insights Into Things on Instagram, or you can get us on our website, where all those links are available at www.insightsintothings.com. Are we ready to get started?
Yes, we are.
All right, here we go. So what is role-playing? Let's have you tell us what is role-playing and what is D&D.
So role-playing is the acting out of the part of a particular person or character. You can compare it to acting out a story in a school play or musical theater. D&D is the name of the game. Well, D&D stands for a game that's called Dungeons & Dragons. What makes this game different from other games is that the core of D&D is storytelling. It is a fantasy-based role-playing game. One person, known as the Dungeon Master, is the one who creates the story and that the other players roleplay to.
Now, there are a number of different types of role-playing games out there. D&D is probably the most famous. It's also the one that's probably the oldest. It was developed in the 1970s. It's been around a long time. I will slightly disagree with the last sentence here. It's not the Dungeon Master that creates the story. It's the Dungeon Master and the players that create the story. So the Dungeon Master is more of a guide along that story. He's kind of the referee who makes the rulings based on the game mechanics. But ultimately, it's the players who make the story, right? I mean, you're playing a role. And that role isn't a scripted role. It's a role that you play live on the fly as situations are thrown at you, right?
Yep.
So everyone makes that story. Now, granted, the Dungeon Master kind of puts together the encounters and stuff like that. But that's really only part of the story.
Yeah.
The real story, the real meat and potatoes of the story really is what the players do.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dungeon Master is just sort of there to kind of facilitate things.
Yep.
But aside from being fun, which I think it is, do you think D&D's fun?
Yep.
So aside from just being fun, there are actually benefits. And when I looked over the show notes, I was actually kind of surprised that you found the website article with benefits for this.
Mm-hmm.
So I give you full props for the effort to make this an informative podcast, not just a entertaining podcast.
Yeah, that's the thing. I really couldn't get too many benefits of D&D, but I was able to find some benefits of role-playing.
And that works because it's both, right?
Yep.
So the benefits that you found came from a website called playgroundresource.com. And you've got a few things in here about what benefits does role-playing offer teens. And we'll just sort of go back and forth and talk about these. So the first thing that they talk about is there are sparks of creativity and imagination. Role-play triggers creativity and imagination. Role-playing, as research studies suggest, develops a teen's capability to become resourceful. They get the chance to exercise their brains through imagination while they're still young. Now, you've been through half a dozen role-playing sessions now so far. Do you think it's helped you to spark your creativity and imagination?
I mean, yeah, the fact that we've done different stories has kind of want me to try and translate one of my stories into possibly a D&D session. Of course, creating a story as a dungeon master, you kind of have to technically be open to suggestions, and it's like a choose-your-own-adventure kind of thing.
Exactly. It helps to build social skills. Now, in our group is me, you, Mommy, and Sam, your brother, so there's not a lot of socializing that goes on, but under normal circumstances, it builds social skills. So role play is an effective way to practice fundamental social skills. Teens intermingle with peers, bargain and work with each other. All these take place during role-playing activity. Social skills predict positive interpersonal ability and success in school. Teens with improved social skills show understanding and become good at creating meaningful relationships. Now, outside of our immediate play group, assuming we were playing with a larger group, because a lot of people are playing online now with people they've never even met, how do you think this type of interaction would help you to build your social skills?
I mean, I'd probably learn how to talk to people a bit more and how to interact with people a bit better. I kind of wish it would kind of help me learn how to start conversations, because that's one social skill I am very bad at. But once you get the conversation started, or at least on something that I can talk about, I can definitely have a good conversation with you. It's just starting the conversation is something I kind of have difficulty with, which is why now for D&D, whenever we do social encounters, I kind of want to be the first to start it.
Well, that's good to know. So as the not new, but the next DM who's running things right now, I'll certainly keep that in mind. So the next thing is there are learning opportunities. The role play technique gives teens more opportunities for presenting them with a variety of different scenarios and situations which they may not otherwise be exposed to. They can explore true-to-life situations in a quote-unquote hands-on way, which is a great method for learning. Teens acquire experience and can try various approaches to fulfill their role in a supported environment. The participants can play a role they see from their own daily life or a role that is completely unknown to them. It's optimized learning in a fun way. So let me ask you, when you play, so you're on your second character now, you're fairly new to D&D. Do you play the characters like a unique character that you created yourself, or do you play it and inject it more with some of your personality and play it as if you were in that role yourself?
Well, I do kind of try and make it a bit unique, and I kind of take this as an opportunity to not only work on my character creating, but also kind of figure out how my characters would really interact. My one character has a specific backstory that would kind of make her a bit more closed off, a little, but also have certain connections with people. So I kind of have to think about, okay, so one of the characters is close to her, so she kind of has to talk to her like they're old friends, while the other she doesn't know anything about, so she kind of has to pretend not to know him. For personality-wise, like I said, I'm kind of trying new things. Like, I'm trying to start conversations more. I think that would be more of her character, although that's pretty much nothing how I am in real life. So, I'd say that she'd be decently social, but also kind of know when to keep to herself.
Okay, so it's giving you that chance to sort of expand outside of your normal personality and kind of explore different aspects of things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the next thing that they talk about is gaining independence. Roleplay helps teens gain independence, which has many added benefits to both the child and the parent. Pretend play helps teens make spur-of-the-moment decisions without the guidance of parents, teachers, or elders. It is the first step towards becoming independent, which will help them in many everyday situations in the present and future. How independent do you feel when we play?
Pretty independent. A lot of times when we do social interactions, especially when we have to decide and make decisions, I definitely feel pretty independent when I need to, like they said, like come up with quick decisions. The one scenario we went through was someone giving us riddles. And although I technically wasn't able to answer any of them because both Sam and Mommy were really quick to answer them, which was really kind of surprising, I still feel as though those kinds of scenarios, I feel a lot more independent, and I'm able to make my own decisions and answer them.
Well, and to your credit, I did ask you the rest of the riddles later on that day, or the next day, and you were able to get a good portion of those. So
yep.
I'm sure if you were given a couple of minutes more, you would have gotten the original ones too.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing they talk about is problem solving. Roleplay presents teens with assorted problems, both large and small, that need solutions and scenarios that require careful thought. They decide on the roles to assume, games to play, who is involved, rules to apply, materials needed, and how to prevail over negative situations if something turns out wrong or inappropriate. This is crucial in teen development and will help them for the rest of their lives. Have you had an opportunity to exercise any problem-solving skills in the D&D sessions you've had so far?
Well, yeah, a lot of different combat encounters. I've tried to kind of come up with different ways to solve it. Like, there was this one time in Sam's story where there was a fire, and I kind of mentioned this before, but I basically decided that, hey, since I can talk to animals, why don't I call up a pelican since we're over water so it can bring up some water and help spread out the fire. And it was kind of the same thing with the rest of us. It was kind of a new encounter, and we kind of had to figure out new and interesting ways on how to solve it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a good example there.
Mm-hmm.
You can also learn to empathize through role-playing. Teens develop more of a sense of compassion and empathy once they take on different roles. For example, teen role-players who put themselves in the shoes of doctors, nurses, carpenters, mechanics, and various other professions will realize the value of those people's jobs. They will learn to appreciate and respect other people when they become grown-ups. And I think from a D&D perspective, putting yourself in the shoes of maybe an underprivileged individual, someone who may be getting bullied, or some other similar situation like that. I mean, we're not really dealing with a lot of doctors and lawyers and stuff in D&D, but the types of roles, you're going to encounter characters that are, for instance, unemployed. And you're going to see how that level of unemployment affects their everyday lives and how it makes their lives differently. Have you had a chance so far to really empathize, be put in the position to empathize with any of the characters or any of the adventurers that you've interacted with?
I think somewhat so far. We are kind of partly into your story, but we have met a couple characters that I kind of empathize for. And well, so yeah, I definitely think that moving forward with the story, and when we do get to meet more of the characters, I definitely think I'm going to learn to empathize with people who do go through those kinds of scenarios.
Okay. The last thing they talk about here is it lets them explore different careers. Finally, roleplay is a fun developmental activity that enables teens to explore different career options. They experience what it's like to perform certain tasks of adults in a simulated and productive exercise. Once these teens grow older, they can more easily decide on what will interest or give them satisfaction. This kind of activity helps prepare them for college and future careers. So I don't think you're going to be a rogue or a ranger professionally anytime soon, but do you think that playing different roles here helps you to kind of explore different possibilities and maybe apply that to real life?
Yeah, like I said, I like playing my one different character differently than how I would normally play. And then I kind of have to figure out how they would react to certain scenarios and, what consequences their actions or what result their actions have. So, yeah, I definitely think that, I am experiencing, once again, problem solving, but also how to handle things.
Cool. Very cool. So you're getting more out of D&D than just the fun experience of D&D then?
Yeah.
Good. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and talk about what some of your D&D experiences has been up until now. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com. Welcome back to Insights into Teens. This week we're talking about our new creative endeavor, Dungeons & Dragons role-playing. So we have some questions here, and I know all the answers to them, but I'm going to pretend that I don't just for the sake of interview purposes. So the first question we have is, what got you into playing Dungeons & Dragons?
Well, my brother Sam had messaged you saying that him and his friends were going to be planning on having a D&D group, and he kind of wanted to use us somewhat as the guinea pigs for it, because it was his first time being a dungeon master. So basically the first session he kind of brought over the story, and we were going to just play it out and see, and once again we were kind of just as guinea pigs for it.
Okay. What was it like having Sam play the Dungeon Master?
It was interesting. So I don't really interact with Sam a lot, and having these D&D sessions was a time to kind of interact with him a bit more. We definitely, I can definitely say it was a really fun time having him kind of tell the story, because I loved storytelling, and to kind of have that in common with him was kind of nice. And having him play the Dungeon Master, I really enjoyed his story, and I really liked how you constantly tried to, move his expectations. You kept asking questions that he didn't necessarily have the answer for, and he even mentioned it at some point.
Yeah, the first couple of sessions were interesting for me because I haven't played D&D in probably 20 years myself. I used to play it a long time ago, but I've played other role-playing systems since then. But it's been probably a good 4 years since I've done any kind of role-playing. So I was very rusty getting into it. And the last time that I played D&D, I didn't get to play it. At the time I was the game master. We weren't running Dungeons & Dragons. We were running another system. So for me to have the opportunity to be a player was kind of a strange experience. So it took a little while for me to get comfortable with that. How are the first few sessions that we had with Sam? Do you have any recollection?
Yeah, the first session we were kind of getting into what was going on, and it was confusing at first, but once we kind of got the characters done, we actually had time for the story. And Sam came up with a creative little town, and the story of the and we kind of had a bit of a twist by the time with the town. And the first few sessions, we definitely had kind of a rocky start. We didn't really have actual figures. We kind of just used your Star Wars figures from your one game. And eventually we did get our own figures. So far, it was really just a lot of us trying to make the story, and it really wasn't like the whole look of it because we didn't have a lot of supplies for it. But I still found a lot of fun, and there were some memorable moments from the very first few sessions that I won't forget.
So what did the first few sessions consist of? You talked about building a character. Did we spend a lot of time doing that? Was there a lot of combat? Was there more dialogue, a lot of talking? Was there role-playing? Like, explain what some of the early sessions actually were.
Well, the first part, after the character creation from the first session, we were basically thrown into combat, And we kind of had to fight off these monsters, and then the town rangers, who were the guards, had come up, saved us, and we were brought into the town. And by that point, we kind of got to the role-playing stage where we either went to the bar or the blacksmith to fix up our tools or get stools. So there was a bit of role-playing there. Then during the next session, we ended up taking some of the rangers over to where basically the creatures lived, and we kind of realized, hey, the creatures probably shouldn't deserve this, so we kind of turned on the rangers, killed them, and there was the nature goddess who took them, and then we were kind of sent to this cave where we had a very close battle with skeletons to get treasure from a temple cave thing. I don't really know what it was. We got gold from it, and then we the next up, we ran into a centaur being captured by the same rangers, so we took them out, got him, and we kind of learned about this dam that was protecting a town, but it caused a lot of the forest animals a lot of inconvenience, especially with the mer people, so we kind of had to go recruiting for various different creatures, 3 specifically, the bird people, the centaurs, and the merfolk. And then, once we recruited all of them, we basically went to battle and destroyed the dam.
Okay. So that was our earlier sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about your character in this story. Tell us about the basics. What race was the character? What class was it? What inspired it? How did you play the character? What were some of the motivations? That sort of stuff.
So, my character was a
tiefling.
A tiefling, and she was a ranger. Basically what inspired me to make her was I learned that the tieflings were kind of characters who weren't socially respected because they were kind of freaky, so I kind of thought, hey, that might actually be kind of cool. And for rangers, I kind of thought that being a nature folk with a bow would be kind of cool, so... And the fact that she was kind of this demon-looking thing would be kind of interesting. And it was kind of lucky, the fact that, the people were rangers, because that kind of gave me an edge when we kind of had to trick them for certain things. So that was kind of surprising. So, yeah.
So... Tell me how you like the story. Did you enjoy the story that Sam made? Well, did you enjoy the story we all made, I guess I should ask. Was it what you expected? Did it end the way that you thought it was going to end? And is it something that you want to continue to do?
It definitely seemed to start out, It started out like, I guess, kind of a basic premise, where 3 characters who don't know each other are left into a battle scenario. But then it started forming its own identity, and I really liked the part where we kind of had to get all of the, different nature creatures to destroy the dam, and then we technically ended on a cliffhanger, and I was kind of hoping, like, okay, what's next?
So do you think Sam did a very good job as the dungeon master? And do you think there are areas that he was better at than others?
Yeah, I definitely think that maybe the role-playing, we could have added a bit more of that. He was definitely good on the combat, and maybe other scenarios, like the one fire scenario that he came up with would be nice. That's not, like, necessarily combat, but still kind of works the same way as combat.
Okay.
So I kind of liked that.
So are there any moments that you remember or that stick out that were entertaining or, anything that was special? Tell us about the one that sticks out the most in your mind.
There's actually a lot that kind of stick out in my mind. The first being from the first session during the combat scenario. So you were a Dragonborn and Mommy was an elf wizard. And there was one point, and she has the ability to have a fireball, create a fireball. And she had to roll a 20-sided die, and if you don't know, when you roll a 1, it's a critical fail, so you kinda, So
you don't just miss, something bad happens.
Yeah, so she ended up rolling a 1, and what happened was she was shooting at the bad guy that was right near you, and she ended up burning your arm.
Yeah. I got a little scared. Fortunately for me, my character actually had resistance to fire.
Yeah.
So I didn't take as much damage as I normally would have.
But still, you made a big deal out of it.
But yes, I learned to not stand anywhere near where she'd be firing anymore after that. So what was your favorite part of role-playing in Sam's story?
I guess my favorite part...
Can't breathe.
Okay, so my favorite session was my favorite would have to probably just be the entire last session. He really upped the comedy on that one. We had a few funny scenarios before, but I definitely think that was the first time where we all kind of laughed.
Yeah.
Like, a ton. I'm pretty sure you had trouble breathing afterwards because you were laughing so hard.
So tell us what happened with your pelican that was so funny.
Okay, so to have my spell work, I would have to touch the animal. So since it was high up in the sky...
Because we're flying on airships at this point.
Yeah, we're flying on airships. I had to use rope from the ship, and I lassoed its neck. And by the time I pulled it in and touched it, I have the ability to hear what it's thinking. And Sam said all it was thinking was, can't breathe, can't breathe, can't breathe, can't breathe, because the rope was still around his neck, and I'm like, okay, gotta get that off.
So that was Sam's hint to take the rope off the animal's neck.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. We had a lot of fun. Sam gave us some really great scenarios that I still look back and laugh at now. So he did a very good job with telling the story, certainly, and with setting us up with some really good situations. Yep. So let's take our second break, and we will come back and talk about what the future of D&D will bring.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Teens. We are talking D&D role-playing. So what does the future of D&D hold for us as a gaming group, which is our question now. So first question we have is, did Sam's story inspire any of us to make our own stories?
Well, yes. I already mentioned how he inspired me to create one of my stories into D&D, but he also inspired you to make your own story.
So what stories are currently in the works?
Well, I'm not entirely sure if your story is still in the works, but we are playing it now, so your story, about the tournament, is we're now playing. And my story is kind of a prequel to the actual movies I'm making now. So, hopefully those are, so, yeah, I don't know what to say.
So, well, that's enough. That's sufficient. So we did start playing, my story last week. We had kind of an intro session and kind of mixed it up a little bit with some role-playing, some riddles, some conversations, a little bit of combat, which you guys panicked right off the bat with the combat.
I mean, I was the one who probably panicked the most since I was close to dying.
Well, you were very close to dying, yes, but you landed the most blows, I think, of everybody. Tell us a little bit about what our current story entails.
So, basically, basically your story is about this tournament held by a mayor of a decently small town that's been underfunded. And it is including 4 different types of, challenges, and you get a bunch of gold and your choice of a prize, for the top 3 champions. Well, the top 3 winners.
Right. So you guys have started the story already. The first part was making your way to this fictional town in a fictional world that we created. You had an encounter with a traveling salesman. And then after that, fortunately, he didn't try to sell you anything. After that, you had an encounter with a leprechaun. Tell us about the leprechaun encounter.
So the leprechaun was an encounter that was quite interesting. Basically, there was this one passage that I ended up drawing a picture for, that was through this giant, what would you call it? Mountain canyon?
Path.
Mountain path. And either we could have gone through the dark, mysterious woods that you mentioned multiple times, or we could climb over, costing multiple days, or we could play his game, or we could pay I don't know how much gold.
1,000.
1,000 gold.
Yeah, I made sure it was enough that you guys couldn't afford it.
1,000 gold to him to pass, or we would play his game. We had to try answering 5 riddles. If we answered 3 of them, we could pass. If we answered all 5, we could get a gift.
Right. Now, I will tell you, post-session now, that had the encounter with the traveling salesman gone differently, you could have wound up with enough funds to pay him to get through the pass.
Seriously?
Seriously. But you guys were very tame. You weren't the prototypical murder hobos that I expected you to be, and you didn't attack anybody.
Oh, that's what that... So if we did that...
So had you done that and searched a little bit in the camp there, you would have come out with quite a bit of cash that you could have paid the leprechaun with.
I'm guessing you would have expected Sam's character to be like that.
Yeah, I actually kind of was, yeah. So I was pleasantly surprised that nobody got killed in that encounter, in that conversation. So after that, so you solve the riddles, you get your prize. What was your prize, by the way?
The Luck of the Irish.
The Luck of the Irish.
Because you used...
I just sort of made that up.
Yeah, it was basically... You had a... What do you call it? Cheat die?
Cheat die, yeah.
Which basically has no 1, so no critical hits, and where the 1 would be, you got a 20. And basically what it was anytime you got a critical hit, you could exchange it to make it a 20, but you'd lose 2 hit points.
Right. If you got a critical miss, you could turn it into a critical natural 20, but you would take 2 damage from that.
Mm-hmm.
So you get through the passage, you go through the big mist in the middle of the passage, you come out of the passage, and what happens?
You meet wolves.
You meet them. So they came up, they shook your hands, and everybody was happy?
No, you see them.
Right. And what happens?
So we decide to fight them, and the 2 wolves come out. We end up attacking them, and then 2 larger wolves come out. We kill the 2 smaller wolves, the 2 larger wolves come out, and then even larger wolves with 2 heads come out.
Yeah, and I had 4 more lined up that were larger than those, too. So, but your party gets help from a mysterious stranger who arrives, and her metallic little bird who pecks the eyes out of the wolves.
Yep.
And you survive. The guard escorts you to town, and that's sort of where we left off there with a little bit of role-playing there. So that's where we'll pick it up on the next session. So what I introduced at that point was a little combat, a little role-playing, a little non-mechanical role-playing. So role-playing itself is, rolling for wisdom and charisma and all that stuff. The non-mechanical stuff was the actual riddles that we did. Mm. So what do you like of those things that I exposed you to? What did you like the most? Did you like the combat? Did you like the mechanical role-playing? Did you like the riddles? What sort of caught your interest?
I liked everything besides the combat because I was nearly dead at that point. So, I mean, I liked how you toned down how you didn't really put the combat too heavily. Although, the combat that did arise, I nearly died. So, I liked the more role-playing aspect of it.
Okay, fair enough. So tell us about the new characters. So everyone made new characters for this session. We didn't carry them over from Sam's story. Tell us about your character here. What class is it? What race is it? Is it based on anything in particular? What inspired it?
So my character is a high elf who is a rogue, and she has a pet, a familiar badger. And a familiar is basically a character you can basically sense through your animal. And we kind of came up with the story, and Mommy's character also has a familiar who is a cat dragon. Well, it's a cat with dragon wings, basically. Well, technically bat wings, I guess. So, we know each other, we're from the same village, we have kind of similar backgrounds. And we're familiar with each other because of our pets, and we have no knowledge of Sam's character.
Okay.
And basically we have this whole thing where there was like a meditation process, in Latin.
In Latin, right.
The title was in Latin, so my character kind of knows part Latin, so some of the words are in Latin. So basically there was this meditation process where you would find your spirit animal, basically, and for my character it was hunting because her father taught her how to hunt, and she went on her first hunt for her meditation process. She met the badger, named him Sage, and after knowing he was her spirit animal, she named him Sage after the plant that grew around her cottage, and yeah.
Okay. So, you said you were talking about maybe doing your own D&D session. Tell us a little bit about the background story on where we might see that particular story go.
So, basically my story for the movie takes place in the modern day, but there was something that happened very, very before, where they end up getting crystals, where the crystals come from. And basically the D&D session's kind of gonna be, how did the crystals get into the cave? That's kind of what the story's gonna focus around. It's gonna be in medieval times, after after the crystals were created, and there are going to be 12 characters who go, and there's going to be 12 characters, 6 of them good, 6 of them evil, who try to find those crystals, realize the danger of their powers, and hide them in caves on Earth, where the magic's kind of toned down.
So the D&D session that you're planning is kind of a prequel to the story in the movie that you're creating as well.
Yes.
So it'll kind of set all that stuff up. That's interesting. Now, is that a story that you plan on maybe being a dungeon master for and running it and letting us play through, or did you have different plans for that?
I'm not entirely sure. I still kind of have to see how it goes. It would be kind of cool to try figuring out the mechanics, but with the way that you play as a player, I'm gonna feel as though I have to expect the unexpected and kind of come up with answers on the fly if I need to.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of a pain in the neck when it comes to being a player for a DM.
Yeah, you kind of have to come up with so many scenarios, yet there's always another scenario you never come up with.
So, all right, that kind of brings us to the next series of questions, and that is being a dungeon master. So, aside from pain in the neck players like me, what do you think is the hardest part of being a dungeon master?
I'd say probably having to kind of come up with the basis of the story, because you have to come up with so many different endings, and it's not as easy as you think. Like, you can definitely go simple, but you can also go extremely complex. And there's a lot of storytelling that goes into it, and you have to kind of also appease to everyone, and like what their choices are, and you have to kind of figure out, okay, so those choices lead to these choices, what do they choose then? And then it kind of branches out, and you're left with possibly a completely different story you didn't really expect to happen.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't actually write a linear story. I sort of developed a couple of scenarios, and what I did was I created a whole bunch of NPCs to put in that world that you can interact with, and each of them has a piece of the puzzle. So instead of having one story that leads to the next, that leads to the next to get you where you are, the entire story is sitting there in that town. And it's a matter of knowing which stone to turn over in what order to get the pieces of the story to unlock different parts of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew I wasn't going to be able to write a story and then have the party stick to that story. So I just kind of have an overall idea of where we're going with it, and then where we eventually go, it's up to you guys, because there's a whole bunch of side stories to do too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a mission hub sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be a problem with my story, because it has a specific beginning and a specific ending, and then there's going to be so many different choices that have to kind of connect with each other in some respects, and it's going to be pretty difficult to get to that one specific ending, because there's going to be so many different options, and I'm pretty sure if I do the story, you're going to try screwing it up.
I'll try and be good for your story, okay?
Thanks.
So, that's kind of it for the questions that I had. Do you recommend this game or role-playing in general to other people to give it a try?
I mean, yeah, I definitely have a lot of fun with this game, and I definitely think many other people will also have fun with this game. Even if you really don't want to create the story, you can definitely have fun as a player, because you still have a part of the story, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be creative with it. You also get plenty of benefits from it that we mentioned before, so I would definitely recommend it to anyone who's willing to play.
So what do you think of the group that you're playing with? Obviously, you're playing with family here. And I think one of the most important things about a good D&D session is having good players in your group. Do you think the players that you have in your group right now help to bring the most out of each other and to bring the most enjoyment out of the story? Do you feel we were weak in some areas, stronger in others? Do you enjoy the group that you're playing with?
Yeah, definitely. I already have good connections with you and Mommy, and I'm able to gain more connections with Sam. So I definitely say that we are a decent D&D group. And we all know how to be in our characters and not really let our own personal decisions go into, well, partly maybe personal decisions, but also kind of sticking to our characters. Also, even though sometimes you kind of mess up the story, it's more of an enjoyable experience when you do. So I'm kind of hoping that kind of thing happens.
Well, thanks. Unfortunately, as the DM, I really don't have an opportunity to screw up the story. So I'm going to have to leave that up to you guys as my players to do that now.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to make decisions and do things that challenge me, and kind of sort of what I did with Sam to kind of pull as much out of the DM as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that was all we had. We'll be right back for your closing thoughts and shout-outs. Go for your closing thoughts.
Okay, I just wanted to say to everyone out there, if you are planning on trying to do some type of D&D role-playing session, I would definitely say that it has plenty of benefits to offer, and even if you don't like the first time, there's always going to be something that you can change and tweak to hopefully make it the best experience you can. D&D is all about experimenting and also gaining connections with people you normally wouldn't really connect with. So I definitely say give it a try if you're willing to, and have fun, guys.
Okay, sage advice as always. Before we go, I would once again suggest folks subscribe to the podcast. This way you'll get it first thing Monday morning at 8 when we go live. You can get video versions of our podcast if you search for Insights into Things. That's all of our shows. Audio versions of just this podcast are found under Insights into Teens. We're listed on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Castro, and any place you can get a podcast. We would also invite you to give us your feedback, some show suggestions, tell us where we're going wrong, where we're going right. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. We are on Twitter at insights_things. You can get high-res versions of our videos on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings. We do stream 6 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. Just a side note there, if you are an Amazon Prime subscriber, you do get a free Twitch Prime monthly subscription. We would greatly appreciate it if you threw that our way. It helps us to keep all these lights and cameras and action going on this side here. You can get audio versions of our podcast at podcast.insightsintoteens.com. You can get us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. You can find us on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings, or you can find links to all those things on our website and more at www.insightsintothings.com. And don't forget to check out our other two podcasts, Insights into Entertainment, hosted by you and Mommy, and Insights into Tomorrow, our monthly podcast hosted by you and my brother Sam. Stumbled over that one pretty good. That's it. Another one in the books.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Your hosts are Joseph and Madison Whalen, a father and daughter team making their way through the challenges of the teenage years.
Welcome to Insights into Teens. This is episode 106, Perspectives, Part 1. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my insightful and intelligent co-host, Madison Whalen.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing today, Maddie?
I'm doing all right.
Anything exciting happened this week?
Well, so far, I had my math quiz and my science test.
Did pretty good?
Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure I got a 100 on the science test, and I'm pretty sure I did good on the math test.
Good. Kind of what we expect. Not to set unrealistic expectations, but you always tend to deliver on these tests and quizzes.
For the most part, yeah.
So this week is kind of a Q&A session. We've done a number of those in the past. The Q&A sessions we've done in the past have kind of been get-to-know-you, fun question and answer type things.
Mm-hmm.
This week's a little bit different. So when we had originally come up with the concept of this podcast, the idea was to get the perspective of a teenager on various topics of the day. And we would delve into individual topics and do research and try to educate the audience and ourselves and stuff like that. But we never really did the perspectives type thing until now. It took us 106 episodes to actually get to what this podcast was supposed to be about.
Yeah.
So today, we've got 3 sets of questions, 10 questions each. And each set of questions is focused in a specific area. Today, we're going to be talking about academic questions, politics, and what I termed as big picture type questions.
Okay.
And this is the first of 2 parts. We've got another one lined up for next week, another set of 10 questions of 3 different categories. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to ask you these questions, and some of these questions you might not know. You might not have a perspective on or opinion on. And, maybe we'll talk a little bit more detail about some of the things that we ask you here. But really, it's just a matter of getting your input and how you see the world through the eyes of a 14-year-old.
Okay.
All right. But before we do that, I do want to invite folks to subscribe to the podcast. You can get us all of our video shows for all of our shows are available if you look for Insights into Things. Audio versions of this podcast can be found as Insights into Teens. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Amazon, pretty much any place you can get a podcast these days. I would also invite folks to reach out to us, give us your feedback. We're always looking for show suggestions and feedback on what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. You can email us at comments at insightsintothings.com. You can get us on Twitter at insights_things. On Facebook, we're at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. On Instagram, we're at instagram.com/insightsintothings, where you can get links to all those and give us feedback directly through our main webpage at www.insightsintothings.com. Are we ready to get started?
I think we are.
All right, here we go. So the first topic that we're going to discuss is academics, and this is stuff about colleges and what you do in school and pretty much everything that's confined to school life. So the first question that I have here is, do colleges put too much stock in standardized tests? What do you think?
Well, I definitely think that, certain colleges probably, a lot of colleges do use standardized tests as a way to kind of figure out if they want to have the student apply, or if they want to accept the student. We talked a couple episodes ago about GPA and how lots of colleges, some colleges only allow students with a certain GPA, and I think in some aspects they might put a little too much pressure on it, because you can you don't have to have a good GPA to be a good student. You can have there are other areas I'm sure that students would be good at, and in some ways I would say certain colleges do put a bit too much onto the standardized test scores, but also colleges are also looking for extracurricular things.
Right.
So I'd say that it's kind of an in-between thing, and it really depends on the college you look at.
Right. And when we talk about standardized tests, we're talking about the SATs and the ACTs, which aren't necessarily a reflection of your GPA.
Yeah.
So your GPA is another statistic that you're coming into even after you take these tests.
Mm-hmm.
And these standardized tests can be, frankly, they can be burdensome. I mean, there's a cost to taking the tests. Sometimes you have to travel to a testing center to take them. You wind up taking practice tests in order to prep for them. And a lot of times, the materials that are on these tests aren't necessarily things that are relevant to your course study when you go to college. In doing a little bit of research, I found an article on U.S. News and World Report where they talked about a report from a group of influential experts who recommend that colleges re-examine their admissions and merit aid policies and consider admitting students without the use of scores from standardized tests such as the SAT or the ACTs. So there is a kind of a grassroots movement to sort of move away from that, because colleges are looking for more well-rounded students, not people that are just very good at taking this one specific test.
Yeah.
So I think I would tend to agree with your opinion on that one.
Okay.
The next question here is cheating, and we've done a whole podcast on cheating in the past. It happens, there's certainly no way you can't honestly say it doesn't happen, but the question here is, do you think that cheating and we'll confine it to grade school or high school in this case, do you think cheating is out of control?
Well, when I was in school, I would say that cheating wasn't really out of control, because we always had, I don't know what to call them, blockers, I think they were called, where we would block off from everyone when we were taking a test. And there were harsh punishments for students who cheated on exams. So, and I'm assuming that high school kind of has the same thing. So I'd say that cheating then wasn't really out of control. I'm assuming that now, since everybody's kind of online, cheating can kind of get a little more out of hand, and it's a little less in the school. But the school also is able to, the teachers are also able to see what the students are doing online, so we're getting somewhere from where we first started when I was in 7th grade. So, I'd say cheating's not really out of control right now.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I hadn't even thought about the question in relation to the schooling at home scenario. So the next question deals with test scores in general. And the question is, are test scores a good indication of a student's competency? And a lot of the reason I ask this is when I was in school, your entire academic achievement was tied to tests. And in recent years, there's sort of been this development, this push, or recognition, I should say, that some students don't take tests well. So in order to be fair to those people, we have to find some other way to determine whether or not they're retaining the knowledge that the school is trying to impart on them. So the question here is, are test scores a good indication of a student's competency?
I don't entirely think it's, you should really depend entirely on test scores, because whenever students are normally taking a test, a lot of them are kind of stressed by those kinds of tests, and their anxiety can sometimes get in the way of that, jeopardizing their score. So I think you need to look more at their performance rather than a test, because having just one, you can still have a group of questions related to what they've learned over the months that they've been in your class. I just wouldn't say focus entirely on that. Maybe have an assignment that deals with all the questions and have give the student time to work on them, because when the day of a test, most students are anxiety-induced, and I also don't think that tests kind of reflect everything, because students also have other creative, for extracurricular activities, for example. It's kind of hard to do a test score on them, especially with art, because art is really based on creativity, and you can kind of apply that in a way to other areas, 'cause like I said, tests get students anxiety based, and they don't entirely perform as well as they probably would if they weren't stressed into having a test. So I'd say just look at their performance over time instead of making them take a test, and using the test scores to determine how well they do.
And I think that's probably a more logical approach to it, because you think about it in the real world, I don't have tests at my job.
Yeah.
If there's a question of whether or not I'm competent at my job, it's about how I perform my job, whether it's project management, hiring new employees, managing employees, doing a technical chore, whatever it is. I'm not taking a written test to do my job. So when I'm evaluated for an annual evaluation, it's based on my on-the-job performance, which is no different than what you're suggesting here, is that, whether or not the student retains that information is something that you should be able to determine based on how they do their assignments throughout the year. So I think that's a very interesting point you make. So the next one's kind of a little off the wall and not one that you've had exposure to. So you're going to kind of have to put your theoretical hat on for this one. Are there benefits to attending a single-sex school? Meaning, as a female, would there be a benefit to you attending an all-girls school where you're not mixing with boys and girls?
Well, I can definitely see benefits for certain people. Like, I could definitely see that it would kind of stop from someone who might, like, someone who's harassed by the opposite sex because there's the battle of the sexes still kind of going on, and especially I'm pretty sure in elementary school we've kind of experienced boys are better than girls or girls are better than boys, and I think maybe when they're younger it might be better to separate them, but still, I think that same-sex school, like, I think that including every sex and gender in a school isn't a bad thing, and that if you do want to go to a single-sex school, it's totally fine. There can be benefits to it if you have experienced problems with the opposite sex, so I would say that there's really no problem. It's really just up to the student if they want to attend and if they feel it would be better for them.
Okay, fair enough. Personal preference. I can totally understand that. So the next one's another kind of theoretical one because you don't really do sports a lot. Does participation in sports keep teens out of trouble, or is there a perception that it keeps teens out of trouble?
Well, I can definitely see that it could probably keep teens out of trouble. One of my assignments for gym this week was actually reading an article about how physical fitness affects and benefits the teenage brain, and there's a lot of benefit to playing sports. Kids learn beneficial I don't know what to call them. Like,
there's certain benefits that you get from sports.
Yeah, like
socializing,
learning teamwork,
right,
that kind of thing. And I can definitely say that it won't entirely keep them out of trouble because some kids who are in sports can still kind of get into trouble. But it is a good way to give your teen some positive benefits that could potentially keep them out of trouble.
Okay, that makes sense. So the next question that we have is one that all teens absolutely love, and it's about homework. So, do you think homework is harmful or helpful to the student?
It really depends on the student, in my opinion. I can definitely say that the extra practice for certain students can definitely be helpful and it can help them improve their grade. But for some students who get stressed by the amount of homework that they get, it can definitely be harmful to them to have to do more homework than they can possibly manage. So it really depends on the student themselves. It can benefit someone who needs the extra practice, and even help them learn other skills like time management, working on independent work. But for students who have struggle managing their time and homework isn't really helping it can be harmful to them.
I would tend to agree. I think homework is something that is subjective and something that's situational. It's homework is, you spoke of anxiety previously with the test. Homework can be just as anxiety generating as tests. Kids get home, they need to relax. They need time to relax and unwind and do recreational things. And when you're loaded up with homework when you get home, that's something that can really eat into you and cause more anxiety, and in the long run can cause more harm than good. Next one, and this is kind of an interesting one here. So, your teachers grade you based on your performance. Should students be allowed to grade their teachers based on their teachers' performance?
Honestly, I've never actually thought of that before. I I definitely think some students can probably jeopardize it and say that their teacher's bad even when they're really not, because they can feel like, oh, she's torturing me, she's giving too much homework, and it's like, really?
So the vindictive student.
Yeah, it's just, I'm not entirely sure if some students are emotionally mature enough to handle that kind of stuff.
That's a good point.
But I definitely think there are some students who could. I just don't really see the point in really grading your teacher's performance. Like, I get if you have, like, a really bad teacher, grading their performance might be able to fix it. But I still really don't see much purpose in that.
Well, and I think the impetus for this question is a lot of teachers' performance is based on their students' performance.
Huh.
So if your students don't perform well, it reflects on you poorly as a teacher. So if your students could be part of that evaluation process and get feedback from the students to the school about whether or not the teacher's doing their job, are they attentive, are they compassionate, do they do their work? Do they are they putting forth the effort needed to teach this to students? I think all of that wouldn't be the sole factor in determining a teacher's performance, but it would be a contributing factor, along with the performance of your students and their attendance and everything else that goes into their performance now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be a bad idea to have the students be the sole judge of whether a teacher's doing a good job or not.
Yeah.
At that point, you got students that are blackmailing their teachers.
Yeah.
So let's move on to some college questions. So the first one that we have here is about the cost of college. So before I ask the question, I want to throw out some numbers here. So for the 2017, and this information comes from I didn't write it down. It's the National Education Association. So for the 2017 and 18 academic year, the annual dollar price for undergraduate tuition, room, and board, so that's to stay on college campus and get educated, were estimated to be just under $18,000 for public institutions, a little over $46,000 for a private nonprofit, and a little over $26,000 for a private for-profit institution. Then what we saw, and that's the most recent time frame. So for comparison purposes, between the 2007 and 8 year and the 2017 and 18 year, in that 10-year time frame, there was roughly a 30% increase in tuition over the course of 10 years. So with that said, we haven't picked the college yet or anything, so we don't know which of these types of institutions that you're going to go to, if you go to one. Do you think, based on these numbers, that the cost of college is too high?
Well, I'd say that I don't think the prices should be increasing as much as they have. So I think that I get that the price that colleges pay a lot of money to have the technology and the resources for students. And of course they need to make the money back. But there is a certain, I feel as though there's a little too much money that the students are expected to give to the colleges, especially at an increasing rate of what we have as 31% in 10 years. So I'd say that don't have the price increasing as much, because I'm pretty sure most people who have gotten out of college were really in debt when they were done. And I just feel as though it's a little too much money to have students pay for it, so I'd say tone it down a bit.
Fair enough. As a parent who's about to send a child to college in a few years, I would totally agree. So let's talk college admissions. Now, we talked briefly about what was involved in college admissions when we did our GPA episode. And we talked about how competitive it could be. How, certain colleges that are choice colleges only have a certain number of slots, and they're very selective in who they allow into their colleges. Do you think overall that the college admissions process is too competitive?
Well, probably for the colleges that have very few entries, it can probably be a bit too competitive in that sense. But for the colleges that pretty much accept almost anyone, I'd say there's not really much room for competition there. But for colleges that have very few slots, yeah, it can probably get a bit competitive between a lot of people, especially if they're trying to go to the same college and one gets accepted and the other doesn't.
So that leads us into our last question in this segment here, and that's about competition. And we're talking not just competition in college admissions, but competition in general in school. Is competition a good thing?
As long as it doesn't go too far, I'd say. I definitely think that competition, is important for people. It's important for students to learn that, I wouldn't say that competition is too bad as long as it doesn't go to the extremes. Competition can teach, especially if you're on a team, think of sports, it teaches you how to work with your team members in order to beat the other team. And as long as everyone realizes that even though one side won, it doesn't mean that the other side didn't do as well. Just because
didn't put in as much effort.
Yeah. I definitely think as long as they know that both teams put an equal amount of effort in towards winning, then I think it's fine. But there is times when competition can get too competitive and people can start rubbing it in other people's faces, and you can get sore winners and sore losers.
There's definitely a dark side to competition. I agree with you there.
Yeah.
That was all we have for this segment. We're going to take a quick break and we'll come back and we're going to get your perspective on politics. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com. Welcome back to Insights into Teens. We are talking teen perspectives on politics. So some of these questions here, again, we have 10 questions. Some of these might be ones you're not very comfortable or affluent or fluent in answering. And I don't want to lead you one way or the other. So I'm just going to ask them and get your take on them. So question 1 is our election process fair?
I'd say for the most part it is. It's a decently secure system, I'd think. And I don't think it really tries to go one way or the other, and it's really just up to the voters, in a sense. So I'd say for the most part it's pretty fair.
Okay. How about our taxation system? Do you think we have a fair system of taxation?
Could you describe it a bit more to me?
Well, let's talk income tax, for instance. Income tax, depending on how much you make, the more you make, the higher percentage you pay in taxes. Is that fair, or should we have a flat tax across the board where everyone pays 10% of whatever they make?
I know that there's a lot of people who are gonna say that we should have it one way or another, but I think so far it's fine. I think that the bigger amount that you make, the higher your income, the higher you have to pay in taxes, is fair enough because I definitely don't think that having a straight-on tax would be the most fair option in my opinion. Honestly, it's really subjective when you think about it this way, because some people might think that, oh, we really shouldn't have it the same way, but then other people are gonna be like, well, we should have it the same way, and I'm pretty sure it's really subjective.
I'll buy that. So let's talk law enforcement, not politics, but still government entities. Do you think that law enforcement cameras, like body cams and dash cams, are an invasion of privacy?
I wouldn't say it that much. Like, if you try to get into an airport, I don't think it's really an invasion of privacy. It's really just for safety. As long as they, don't invade your personal privacy, I think it's fine. They're really just trying to check if it's safe, and they really don't care what you're carrying in your suitcase or anything like that. It's just making sure you don't have anything bad.
Okay. Buy that. Should government have a say in our diets?
Definitely not. The government shouldn't control how you want to eat. You want to eat healthy, you don't want to eat healthy, you want to be somewhere in the middle. It should be up to you. If the government were to control that, then I'm pretty sure a lot of people would have a problem with that. And I really don't think that controlling our food is something the government should have a say in.
Okay. You seem to have a very strong opinion about that. Good for you. So you haven't run into this yet, but I think you'll probably run into it a little bit more in high school. Should the military be allowed to recruit in high schools?
I kinda don't like the feeling of that. I feel as though you should be at least 21 to be recruited into the army. I don't feel comfortable having teenagers.
Well, you have to be 18 at least. That's the legal age.
Yeah.
So you're looking at them trying to recruit seniors in high school.
Yeah, yet I still don't feel comfortable with 18-year-olds. I say 21 is probably the oldest I feel comfortable with. I just feel as though, the seniors are still a little young, and I know that people used to recruit 14-year-olds for war, and I don't really feel comfortable with the fact that seniors who are only 18 are getting recruited into the military.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel it would be better if they were just 21.
Okay, that's perfectly fair to have that opinion. Do you think the government should provide free health care? Other countries do. Canada does. The UK does. A lot of European countries, you get your health care for free. Do you think they should do that here in the United States?
I mean, yeah, the fact that other countries are doing it, and the fact that we haven't done it, yeah, I'd say we should have free healthcare. Because since we pay so much to the government at this point, I think free healthcare is the least they could do.
I would not disagree with you there. So let's talk about elected officials and term limits. So right now, the only office that has term limits on it that I'm aware of is the President of the United States. He's allowed to have 2 4-year terms, and that's it. Whether they're consecutive, separated, whatever. He's only allowed to have 2 terms. Do you think that should be the rule for all politicians, or is it okay that being the exception to the rule?
So, I know your opinion on this already, and I'm gonna have to agree with you there. I do think that that all political offices should have a term limit, however long it be.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we're in agreement on that one. Let's talk about campaign contributions and political campaigns in general. So, and I'm going to give a little background on this. So right now you have people that spend millions and millions of dollars on a political campaign to be elected to an office that pays maybe a couple $100,000. Do you think that campaign contributions distort our political system?
I'm not entirely sure on this. I've never really been asked this, and I still don't have a lot of background knowledge on it.
Okay.
Unless you wanted to explain a little more about it.
Well, I don't want to distort your perspective on there. I have my own very strong opinions about this. But maybe this is something that we can revisit in a later podcast after you've had a chance to maybe do a little research on it.
Okay.
Voters. So voters are supposed to be the people that run the country through elected representatives. I don't want to ask if you think our elected representatives actually represent what we want, but I will ask you, should the voters have more say in how our country is run?
I'm actually gonna go with a no for this one. People have very strong opinions, and a lot of those opinions kind of go against other people's very strong opinions, and the fact that there are so many people who believe one way and so many people who believe a certain way the other way very strongly. I'd say we'd come into a bit more conflict if voters had more of a say in how our government is run. So I think now it's okay. It's better to kind of have a little less of a say in the government, just because so many people have so many different opinions, and I think we would get into pretty big conflicts.
It's interesting. It's a very, very mature approach to the question. The last question that we did have here is another one about campaign. So one of the things that politicians tend to do on a campaign trail, which sometimes could last 12 to 18 months or longer, is they make a lot of promises. They win voters over by understanding what voters want from their politicians and then promising or proposing ways to give that to the voters. So the question is, should politicians be held legally accountable for what they promise in order to get elected? So if a politician promises, I'm not going to raise taxes if I get elected, and he gets into office and he raises taxes, should the voters have some legal means to challenge him at that point in time?
I mean, in that kind of respect, yes. But I do think that in certain things they say, like, say they say something, but they make no changes, I don't think they should be legally accountable to do that specific thing. Like, if they say they're gonna on the term of taxes,
Well, and I'm not saying, just take a step back. I'm not saying they have to necessarily accomplish it, because there isn't a single politician out there that can promise something and make it happen by himself. But, I'm saying if they promise to do something and they fail to propose legislation or move legislation or debates in that direction, and they have absolutely no intention, like, for instance, taxes is a great one. All right. So George Bush Sr., he got elected, and one of his famous sayings when he was on the campaign trail was, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And one of the first things he did was impose new taxes when he got into office. So he clearly lied when he was on the campaign trail, knowing full well that he was going to raise taxes, but was just saying that so he could get elected. Under those circumstances, he was diametrically opposed to what he said. On the other hand, you have some politicians that get elected because they want to give you universal health care. And they might get into office and they might try to put a universal health care plan together and they can't get it passed and it fails. Well, at that point in time, they've put the effort in to try to fulfill their promise, but they couldn't get it passed. They didn't go completely against it, though. That's sort of the situation I'm talking about.
Okay, so if they directly oppose what they'd promised,